Good morning. Um, I woke up this morning thinking about Goffman's idea of the self. And the self is called into being in the situation for Goffman. And what that means for the internet is really weird because it puts us in this weird sort of time loop where at one point in time, my recorded self might be creating a situation in an online sort of setting. But my real self might be sitting in the chair at the dentist, oblivious to what's happening with my online persona. I might go back and forth in time, enter these cycles and trajectories of time. So I've arranged for a video that I've already recorded to premiere later in time, and I'm talking about it now on this stream where it's being recorded, but who knows when it will appear online. And so it's these sort of weird conglomerations where the self is existing in multiple places on multiple planes in multiple moments in time. And that's fascinating. And it brings up another one of Irving Goffman's concepts, which is the frame. Um, and so framing is cool because it's sort of telling us okay, so in any given situation, there's one way of looking at it, there's another way of looking at it, and then really there's sort of layers and layers and layers of events happening at the same time. And actually, YouTube captures this really well as people are presenting, for example, in a live stream, they're going to be pulling up prior live streams. They'll be looking at PVK's take on what John Vervaeke said, looking at layers and layers and layers of frame. Okay, and this is all important because I've been thinking about gaze. Gaze keeps coming up in the videos of this little corner of the internet. It comes up as a possible bridge, I think, theoretically, between what's happening in this little corner of the internet, what's happening in estuary groups, what's happening as people are meeting face to face versus in these sort of online versions of face to face. And so I found that Irving Goffman's work is really important for thinking about this. His book is actually, this is one of another collection of essays called Interaction Ritual, Essays on Face-to-Face Behavior. And so part of that is the gaze. And so the whole reason I'm talking about gaze, interaction ritual, performance of the self, the weird time thing, the reason I'm talking about this is because I'm trying to write a dissertation. So forgive me because this is obtuse. But I thought it would be interesting. It's part of a collaborative ethnography thing that's definitely in all the methods that I've been talking about, writing about. So my thinking here with the gaze is actually I'm thinking with Jonathan Urry's work on the tourist gaze, how the tourist, I haven't read this work in 10 years, so I'm actually gonna pull it up. But it's how people sort of create this connection between the self and wherever they're going by looking at these sacred objects in the space. Um, so gaze, I guess the point then for me then is that gaze is not only me looking at you, it's me looking at objects, me recognizing that you're seeing me. And of course, gaze and seeing and being seen are similar, right? But they're not exactly the same because I can gaze in your direction without seeing you, or I can gaze. I don't have a phone here, but I can gaze at my phone. I can gaze at you beyond my phone, like who's had the terrible experience of talking to or watching someone talk to like a child, right? And they've got their phone up, right? And the kid's down here, and the kid can almost meet your gaze, but not quite because your gaze is on the phone. And we all do it probably, but holy shit. When you're not meeting the child's gaze, you're missing so much of what it is that the child has come to tell you or whatever. This is not a critique of parents because parents are with their children 24 hours a day, and I'm sure it's exhausting. But well, not literally 24 hours, but whatever. The point is, this is why I don't live stream. Um, I'm working through the meaning of gaze with all of these sort of levels of theory. And so to add another theory component to this, this is just me spitballing. This isn't really the paper isn't ready yet. Obviously, I'm thinking about what it means to be liminal. And so Victor Turner has given us this framework for thinking about liminality. And he's talking about moving from different official identities or moving through different official identities within. He's studying some tribe somewhere. I don't know. That's probably a disrespectful way of talking about it. Don't cancel me. Um, but what he's doing is he's looking at people who are between these formal rites of passage um, in these groups. And he's saying, well, you can move from being a neophyte through this liminal stage and into becoming a fully grown adult in these cultures. And so that's moving from one official status to another. And I guess in my work, as I'm thinking about people who might be religious liminally, um, or something like that, people who might have liminal identities with regard to religion or whatever, they are actually folks who have left an official identity and kind of going into this no man's land of, some people call it sort of, here's a guy I used to read his blog, Michael Spencer, the internet muck. He used to talk about this post-evangelical wilderness. So evangelicals might feel like they're entering into the post-evangelical wilderness or into the new church, the emerging church movement 20 years ago, or they might, they feel kind of lost, right? And then there's folks who might be like sort of experimenting with orthodoxy or whatever. But it's not an official identity, official process. I guess if you become a catechumen, there you are officially in an official process. But what is your gaze and what is the gaze you receive as you're moving out of maybe an official standing in a religious sense into a less official standing, sometimes into a stigmatized, especially if you live in an insular religious community, you might be experiencing a lot of stigma if you've left or if you're out or whatever, depending on your demographics, depending on who's in your community around you, right? So that is another question for how does that influence gaze, of course. And then we're moving into these online communities, right? And so Irving Goffman, he died of stomach cancer, like, I don't know, like quite a long time ago. Um, um, I don't know what year, but but his work precedes this type of internet communication that we have now, and of course his successors, interaction ritual chain theory, Randall Collins, someone whose work I'm also engaging. His work is sort of following this lineage and this trajectory, saying that the types of gaze, for example, that you can procure in online spaces, that's not the same. That's not the same quality. That doesn't have the same effect as these in-person, genuine, face-to-face relationships. I'm arguing against Collins right now, sort of saying, actually, we can extend this theory and see how these online connections really seem to bolster in-person communication. But at the same time, I'm questioning myself here. I'm questioning my gut instinct, because even if it's true that online communication is just really important for developing our identities in 2024, even if it's true that online relationships build in these ways that are fascinating and really seem to meet the moment and meet a need, what if he's right? What if this online stuff, deprived of bodily co-presence, what if our extended cognition, what if our our brains don't connect with the people in the online space the way that they would in this when we develop these in-person um, rituals, which involve our whole bodies. So what does that have to do with gaze? It depends on how we're thinking about gaze. So is gaze going to be this literal gaze? And if it is a literal gaze, is it possible to gaze through the screen? Are we sort of holding up our phones if we're trying to gaze through the screen? Are we holding up our phones to the people, not just children, but the people in our real face-to-face lives, in a way that sort of insulates us against that true connection? Or are we getting true connection online in a way that it's just not possible for us to get it in person? So there's gaze in the literal sense, and there's many different sort of ways to think about gaze. I was listening to Dr. Green's talk where he's talking about the gaze of Christ. It's beyond me, right? I don't have those kind of theology chops, but or Christian gaze, I don't even know. I should have done some research before I started talking to this camera. But so there's gaze in the literal sense, and then there's gaze in the sense of seeing and being seen. And I wonder if the actual literal gaze is doing something functionally that we don't get from other forms of interaction, right? Is making eye contact, is receiving someone's, whatever it is, something about the actual gaze, is that doing something for us that can't be achieved in these other modes of contact? And I can't help but think that there's got to be a way to be seen without being gazed upon. And that brings me into another direction theoretically. There's no way I can post this, but actually this is helping me refine my thinking for my dissertation. This is a very much in ethnography. So it's a genre that folks may or may not be familiar with. This is Ito Tavore's Summoned. He's living in a neighborhood with Orthodox Jews. It's so interesting. And he's talking about, and he's got all of these experiences of when is the Orthodox Jew identity called into being by the surrounding objects in the environment, by the surrounding people in the environment. And so it has me thinking, well, is summoning a form of gaze, or is gaze a form of summoning? Is it something that calls us to bring out a particular aspect of our identity? And if we're liminals, how does that happen? How do we know which, especially, from these unofficial religious kind of identities, how do we know which identity is being summoned? And is it possible for us to be called into being by these objects in our environment, including in our online environment, through the kind of summoning process that Ito Tavore talks about? And so something I feel like I should give an example here. One of the examples I remember reading in this book is that if an Orthodox Jewish person is in the market or something, and they're sort of designated by the clothing that they're wearing, by the head covering and so forth. Oh, this is an Orthodox Jew. People know by sight. They have this religious authority, and so strangers in the supermarket might, maybe not the supermarket, but the local market might come up to them and say, is this kosher? And they might be called upon or summoned to give that identity, or to use their Orthodox Jewish identity, even though they're just going about their daily life, and they might not be thinking about their Orthodox Judaism in that moment. So as we go day to day in our online lives, is gaze, is seeing each other some kind of trigger of our liminal identities, or our Christian identities, or our atheist identities? Does it bring forth that identity just by being seen, or being gazed upon? And is there a way that we reflexively bring that out of each other? That is a lot of sociological theory, which is something I'm trying to build into my dissertation work. You'll see my paper in a one of these days. I think this is sort of the groundwork for a paper on gaze. And those are just some initial thoughts. Okay, well, see you later.